before the world had shaken, before the sky stretched above and the earth rested below, there was nothing but quiet, not darkness, not cold, not wind, just a soft, endless stillness. This is where it all began. In the beginning, there was only chaos. It was not loud or wild. It was calm, empty, and wide. From that calm came the first ancient forces. They were not yet gods. They were the seeds of what would become the world. Gaia appeared, the earth itself, strong and steady. Then came Tartarus, the deep below. Nyx followed, the silent night, along with Erebus, the shadow, and finally Eros, the gentle pull of love and life. These were the first to exist. They did not speak. They simply were. From them, the story of the gods would slowly unfold. Now you can rest. Let the quiet of that first moment carry you to sleep. As we begin the story of the Greek gods, Gaia was the earth. She was wide and steady and full of life. She needed no beginning and no end. From herself alone, she brought forth Uranus, the sky. He rose above her and became her partner. When he stretched across her, the world began to take shape. Together, Gaia and Uranus had many children. First came the Titans. They were tall, strong, and full of power. There were 12 in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Oceanus, Cous, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Cronus were the sons. The daughters were Theia, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, and Tethys. Each would come to shape the world in some way. But Gaia and Uranus had other children too, strange and mighty ones. There were the Cyclopes, with one large eye. Then the Hecatoncheires, giants with 100 arms and 50 heads. Uranus looked upon these children and felt fear. He thought they were too wild, too strong. So he pushed them deep into Gaia, hiding them inside her. Gaia was full of sorrow. She loved all her children. She did not want to keep them trapped, so she asked the Titans for help. Only the youngest, Cronus, was bold enough to listen. She gave him a curved blade and a plan. When Uranus came close one night, Cronus struck. He wounded his father and drove him away. From the blood that touched the earth came many beings. The Furies, the giants, and the ash-tree nymphs. From the sea foam where Uranus fell, another figure began to rise. She would be called Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. With Uranus gone, Cronus became ruler. The Titans followed him. It was a time of peace and order. Gaia rested. The world grew. But Cronus had heard a prophecy. One day, his own child would rise and do the same to him. So Cronus made a choice. Each time his wife Rhea gave birth, he swallowed the child. One by one, he took them: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. But when Zeus was born, Rhea could not bear to lose another. She wrapped a stone in cloth and gave it to Cronus. He swallowed the stone. Meanwhile, she hid Zeus in a cave on a distant mountain. And so, deep in secret, the one who would change everything began to grow. Zeus was hidden in a quiet cave, far from the eyes of Cronus. There, in the care of nymphs and protected by the earth itself, he grew strong. Each day his power grew. He drank the milk of a magical goat. He learned the ways of the world, and he waited. Far away, Cronus ruled. He thought he was safe. He thought the prophecy had been broken, but deep inside he felt uneasy. Dreams came to him, full of thunder and change. The sky no longer felt calm. When Zeus became a young man, he left the cave and went in search of help. He met Metis, a wise and clever goddess. She gave him a plan and a drink. With this gift, Zeus returned to Cronus. Disguised as a servant, he offered the drink to the king. Cronus drank, and his stomach turned. One by one, he coughed up the children he had swallowed. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon rose from the depths. Though confused, they stood tall. They were full-grown, and their power had not faded. Zeus stood before them and told them the truth. They were his brothers and sisters, children of Cronus, children of the prophecy. Together they would not be defeated. So the war began. The gods who had been swallowed stood with Zeus. They were called the Olympians. Cronus and the other Titans stood against them. The battle lasted 10 years. Mountains shook. Rivers ran dry. The sky was filled with fire and wind. At first, the Titans had the upper hand. They were older and strong. But Zeus remembered the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, the strange children hidden deep in the earth. He climbed down into the dark and freed them. The Cyclopes were grateful. They gave Zeus a gift, a bolt of lightning. To Poseidon, they gave a trident. To Hades, they gave a helmet that made him unseen. The Hecatonchires, with their many arms, hurled stones and broke the lines of the Titans. With their help, the tide turned. Zeus struck down Cronus with a thunderbolt. The Titans fell. The war was over. Zeus and his siblings stood on Mount Olympus. They had won. The age of the Titans had ended. The time of the Olympians had begun. But even victory brings its own weight. The world would not rest for long. New stories were already waiting. After the war, the world was quiet again. The sky no longer burned. The rivers flowed. The earth breathed slowly. Zeus and his siblings climbed Mount Olympus. There, high above the world, they built their home. Zeus became the king of the gods. He ruled the sky, the storms, and the laws of men. He sat on a great throne with a lightning bolt in his hand. His voice shook the clouds, but his eyes watched with care. Poseidon ruled the seas. He lived in a palace under the ocean, where waves rose and fell at his word. His trident could calm the sea or stir great storms. Sailors prayed to him for safe travel and calm waters. Hades ruled the underworld. He was not cruel, but he was quiet. He watched over the dead and kept order in the world below. His kingdom was dark and still, filled with shadows and silence. Hera became queen of Olympus. She was the goddess of marriage and family. Though proud and often angry, she was wise and strong. She watched over the bonds that held people together. Demeter watched over the earth. She was the goddess of crops and harvests. When she smiled, fields grew full and golden. When she wept, the land grew cold and bare. Pestia was the goddess of the hearth. She kept the fire burning in every home. Her presence was quiet but warm. Though she had no throne on Olympus, she was honored in every house. These were the elder gods, born from Rhea and Cronus. But they were not alone. New gods joined them in time. Athena was born from the mind of Zeus, full of wisdom and skill. She wore armor and guided heroes. Apollo, the god of light and music, brought truth and healing. Artemis, his twin, roamed the forests as the goddess of the hunt. Ares, the god of war, stood tall and fierce. He loved battle, though he was not always wise. Hephaestus, the god of fire and craft, built wonders with his hands. Though he limped, his skill was unmatched. Aphrodite, born from the sea, was the goddess of beauty and love. Her smile could move hearts and stir peace or passion. Hermes, the swift messenger, wore winged sandals and carried the words of gods and men. These 12 were called the Olympians. Each ruled their domain. Each had their story. Together they watched over the world. But even among gods, peace does not last forever. Their stories had only just begun. The gods lived high on Olympus, but the world below was still empty. There were animals, trees, rivers, and stars, but there were no people, no voices, no stories. The gods watched and waited. Then came Prometheus, a titan who had not fought against the Olympians. He was clever and kind. He looked at the empty world and felt it needed something more, something that could think, speak, and learn. So Prometheus shaped men from clay. He formed them by hand, with care and thought. Then he asked Athena to breathe life into them. She did, and the first humans opened their eyes. At first, they lived simple lives. They had no fire, no tools, no shelter. They feared the cold and the night. Prometheus watched and felt pity. He wanted to help, but Zeus had forbidden giving fire to humans. He feared what they might do with it. Prometheus did not listen. One night he climbed Mount Olympus. He took a spark from the sacred flame and carried it down to earth, hidden in a stalk of fennel. He gave it to mankind. With fire, everything changed. People warmed their homes, cooked food, shaped metal, and lit the dark. Zeus looked down and saw the fire. His anger burned. To punish Prometheus, Zeus ordered him chained to a rock. Each day, an eagle came and tore at his side. Each night his body healed. The pain began again with every sunrise. Prometheus would suffer, but he did not regret his gift. Zeus also planned a second punishment, one that would fall not just on Prometheus, but on all of mankind. He called on Hephaestus to shape a woman from clay. She was lovely and graceful. The gods each gave her a gift: beauty, charm, music, skill, curiosity. They named her Pandora, which means Olga. Zeus sent Pandora to earth with a sealed jar. She was told never to open it, but the gift of curiosity weighed on her. One day she lifted the lid. From the jar flew pain, sickness, envy, and death, all the troubles of the world. Pandora fell to the ground and wept. But at the bottom of the jar, one thing remained. Hope it stayed, small and quiet, like a light in the dark. So people were no longer perfect, but they were not alone. They had fire, they had each other, and they had hope. And that would be enough for now. On Mount Olympus, the gods were powerful, but they were not always peaceful. Even among immortals, there was love and anger. There was pride. There was jealousy. And these feelings often shaped the world below. Zeus, the king of the gods, was known for his many loves. Though he was married to Hera, his heart often wandered. He fell for mortals and goddesses alike. He changed his shape to reach them. He became a swan, a bull, a shower of golden light. Each story left behind children who were part god and part mortal. Hera saw. She was the goddess of marriage. She did not forgive easily. When she was angry, the world trembled. She chased those Zeus loved. She made their lives hard. She sent storms, madness, and monsters. Her anger was sharp, but it came from a deep place. She wanted loyalty. She wanted respect. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, brought beauty wherever she walked. She stirred desire in gods and mortals. But love is not always soft. Sometimes it is quick and wild. Sometimes it hurts. Aphrodite loved Ares, the god of war. Their secret was known, but not always spoken. Hephaestus, her husband, knew of it. He was the god of fire and craft. He did not raise his voice. He built a trap instead. One day he caught them in his net. All Olympus saw. The laughter echoed, but the wounds stayed hidden. Apollo, the god of light and music, also knew love and sorrow. He chased Daphne, a forest nymph. She ran from him, calling for help. The earth answered, her feet rooted, her arms stretched into branches. She became a tree. Apollo stood before her, full of grief. He touched her leaves and vowed to honor her forever. Artemis, his twin, kept to the wilds. She guarded her freedom and her maidens. A man once saw her by accident as she bathed in a stream. She turned him into a stag. His own hounds chased him, not knowing he was their master. Even mortals felt the reach of divine love and anger. Echo, a nymph, loved the sound of her own voice, but she crossed Hera, who cursed her to speak only the last words she heard. Echo met a boy named Narcissus. He was so in love with his own reflection that he could not look away. He'd faded by the water. She faded into air. These stories may seem strange, but each one holds a truth. Love is powerful. Jealousy can burn. Even gods must face the cost of what they feel. Beneath the earth, far from the light of Olympus, there was another realm. It was a place of stillness, a place where souls went after death. It was called the underworld. Hades ruled this realm. He was not evil, but he was stern. He kept balance. He made sure the dead stayed in their place. His kingdom was deep and vast. Rivers marked its edges. Each had its purpose. The river Styx was dark and sacred. Gods swore oaths upon it. If they broke those oaths, they would lose their voice for 9 years. The river Lethe brought forgetfulness. Souls drank from it to forget their past lives. The river Acheron carried sorrow. The river Phlegethon burned with fire. The river Cocytus echoed with cries. To reach the underworld, a soul had to cross the Styx. Coron, the boatman, ferried them across. He asked for payment. The dead were buried with coins placed on their eyes or under their tongue. Those who had no coin wandered the shore, lost and restless. On the other side was the great gate. Cerberus, a 3-headed dog, stood watch. He let souls enter, but never leave. Past the gate, the underworld stretched into many parts. Some souls were judged. 3 judges waited in silence. If a soul had lived with honor, it went to the Elysian fields. There the land was gentle and bright. Heroes walked in peace. Poets sang. The wind was soft. If a soul had done great wrong, it went to Tartarus. This was the deep prison where monsters and fallen gods were kept. It was dark and endless. There the Titans who had fought against Zeus were bound. Most souls went to the Asphodel meadows. It was not a place of joy or pain. It was quiet. Souls wandered without much thought. They were shadows of who they once were. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, ruled beside Hades. She had once lived on earth. She was the daughter of Demeter. One day Hades saw her and took her to his realm. Demeter searched and wept. The earth grew cold. Crops died. Nothing grew. At last a deal was made. Persephone would spend part of the year below and part above. When she rose, the earth bloomed. When she returned, the world went still. The underworld was not a place of fire and punishment. It was a part of the world, like the sea or sky. It reminded all that life had an end, and beyond that end, a path still waited. While the great gods ruled Olympus, many others watched over the world in quieter ways. These were the minor gods and spirits. Some walked with the wind. Some lived in rivers or trees. Some watched over small moments that shaped everyday life. Eros was the spirit of love. He was not loud, but his presence was strong. He carried a bow and arrow. One touch could spark desire. Some said he was the child of Aphrodite. Others believed he was older, as old as the world itself. Night was the goddess of victory. With wings on her back, she flew beside those who fought with honor. She did not choose sides. She honored skill and courage, whether in battle or games. Iris was the messenger of the gods. She traveled with the speed of light, riding rainbows across the sky. She carried messages from Olympus to the world below. Her voice was clear and gentle. Nemesis watched over balance. She brought justice when pride grew too large. She reminded the proud that every action has a cost. Her steps were quiet, but her hand was firm. Thanatos was the spirit of peaceful death. He did not cause harm. He came when a life had ended, as soft as a breeze. His twin was Hypnos, the spirit of sleep. Hypnos wrapped the world in rest. Even Zeus could not resist his touch. The Muses were 9 sisters. Each ruled a part of art and learning. One guided poetry, another inspired music, one shaped dance. They whispered to poets and artists, helping them shape beauty from thought. The fates were older than the gods. They spun the thread of life. One spun it, one measured it, one cut it. Even Zeus respected them. No one could escape what they wove. Nature itself was full of spirits. Nymphs lived in forests, rivers, and hills. They danced in moonlight and hid from loud voices. Dryads lived in trees, naiads in streams, oreads in mountains. They were shy, but they cared for their homes. Pan, the god of the wild, roamed the woods. He had the legs of a goat and the laugh of mischief. He played a pipe that echoed through valleys. Animals followed him. So did fear and joy. These gods did not rule from thrones. They did not strike with lightning or command the seas. But they shaped the world all the same. In every wind and shadow, in every dream and whisper, their stories lived on. As the world changed, a new kind of story began. These were the tales of heroes. They were not gods, though some were born from them. They were mortals who faced great trials. Their lives were full of danger, love, and loss. The gods often watched. Sometimes they helped. Sometimes they did not. One of the greatest was Heracles. He was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman. From birth he was strong. Hera, who hated him for being the child of Zeus, sent 2 snakes to his cradle. But even as a baby, Heracles crushed them. Later in life, Hera caused him to lose his mind. In his sorrow, he asked the gods how he could make amends. They gave him 12 labors. Each was harder than the last. He fought the Nemean lion, whose skin could not be pierced. He captured the golden hind of Artemis. He cleaned the vast stables of Augeas in one day. He faced monsters and fetched golden apples. Each task shaped him. Each trial added to his legend. Perseus was another hero. He was sent to bring back the head of Medusa, a creature with snakes for hair. One look from her would turn any man to stone. With gifts from the gods, including a mirrored shield, he faced her. He looked only at her reflection and struck. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse. Theseus traveled to Crete to face the Minotaur. Deep inside a twisting maze, the beast waited. With the help of Ariadne, who gave him a thread to mark his path, he found the Minotaur and ended its terror. Jason gathered a crew of heroes called the Argonauts. Together they sailed in search of the Golden Fleece. Their journey was long and full of tests. They faced harpies, clashing rocks, and strange lands. With the help of Medea, Jason reached his goal. Odysseus was clever and bold. After the war at Troy, he spent 10 years trying to return home. He blinded a giant Cyclops. He heard the song of the sirens and tied himself to the mast to resist them. He passed through storms and trials, always moving forward. When he reached home, he found his place waiting. These heroes were not perfect. They made mistakes. They faced fear, but they kept going. Their stories lived on not because they never failed, but because they always rose again. In every age, stories of heroes remind us that courage can come from anyone. Even the gods paused to watch them. For many years, the gods of Olympus ruled the hearts and minds of people. Their names were spoken in prayers and carved into stone. Great temples rose in their honor. Festivals were held. Stories were shared by firelight and in marble halls. But time moved forward. New lands rose. New ideas grew. People changed. The world turned. As the Roman Empire spread, many gods remained but took new names. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera became Juno. The stories stayed, but the voices telling them began to fade. In time, other beliefs came. Other gods were worshipped. New paths were followed. The temples grew quiet. The statues stood still, watching as moss and wind wore away their edges. But the gods did not vanish. They remained in memory, in poems and paintings, in dreams and words passed from one generation to the next. The muses still inspire songs. The fates still remind us of life's thread. The stories of Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus still shape the way we speak of courage and cleverness. The flame of Prometheus still burns when we chase knowledge. The quiet of Hades lingers when we think of what comes after. Even now, their names appear in books and skies. Planets named after gods drift through space. Schools, cities, and ships carry their stories in their names. The gods no longer walk among us, but they do not need to. Their stories were never just about power. They were about love, pride, struggle, and wonder. These are things that never leave us. Bend so the gods live on, not in thrones of gold, but in the quiet corners of our minds, in the hush before sleep, in the questions we still ask about the stars above and the world within. Their time has passed, but their light still glows, gentle, distant, eternal. After the Titans were defeated and the Olympians took their thrones, the world was quiet for a time, but not all were at peace. Deep in the earth, anger still stirred. Gaia, the earth herself, felt sorrow for her fallen children, the Titans. Her grief grew into rage. To challenge the gods of Olympus, Gaia gave birth to a new race. They were called the Giants. Each one was massive and wild. Their feet were rooted in the earth. Their heads reached the stars. Some had snake tails instead of legs. Others wore burning armor or carried mountains as weapons. This battle would be called the Gigantomachy. It was not a war of law like the one before. It was wild, full of fury and flame. The giants wanted to throw down the Olympians and rule the heavens. The gods rose to meet the threat, but the giants were strong, so strong that not even Zeus could defeat them alone. A prophecy said the gods would need the help of a mortal to win. Zeus chose Heracles, the greatest of heroes, to fight beside them. The battle began. The sky turned red. The earth shook. The sea boiled. One by one, the giants charged. Porphyrion tried to take Hera as his prize. Zeus struck him with a thunderbolt, and Heracles pierced him with an arrow. Enceladus threw mountains and set fire to the land. Athena crushed him with a great rock, said to be the island of Sicily. Another giant, Alcyoneus, could not die on his own land. Heracles dragged him across the border, and there he fell. Dionysus used wine to confuse his foes. Artemis struck from the shadows. Even Hades sent spirits to pull giants down into the underworld. The war raged across the world, but slowly the tide turned. With Heracles beside them, the gods brought down each giant. Their bodies fell and became the land itself. Their roars became wind. Their rage faded into stone. When the last giant fell, the world grew still again. The gods had faced their greatest threat, and once more Olympus stood strong. But the battle left marks. Some said volcanoes were the breath of sleeping giants. Earthquakes were their restless dreams. The gods had won, but the world would always remember the fury that once rose from the deep. And in that memory, the gods knew that even the heavens could be shaken. The sea was vast and deep. It moved with power and mystery. Beneath its waves lived gods and creatures as old as time. Poseidon ruled over it all, but he was not alone. Before Poseidon, there was Oceanus, one of the first Titans. He was not the sea itself, but the great river that flowed around the world. He did not fight in the war against the Olympians. Instead, he watched in silence, letting time carry him forward. Nereus was another ancient being. He was called the Old Man of the Sea. He was gentle and wise. He could change his shape and see the future. His daughters were the Nereids, sea nymphs who helped sailors and guarded the waves. Among the Nereids was Thetis, the mother of Achilles. Another was Amphitrite, who became the queen of the sea when she married Poseidon. She lived in a golden palace beneath the ocean and watched over the deep with calm strength. Triton, their son, had the upper body of a man and the tail of a fish. He blew a conch shell to calm or stir the seas. His voice echoed across the waves like thunder and wind. Many creatures swam through myth. There was Scylla, once a beautiful girl, who was turned into a monster with many heads. She lived near a narrow strait and snapped at ships that passed. Opposite her was Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallowed the sea and spat it out again. There were sea serpents and giant fish. There were horses that rode the waves and dolphins that carried messages from the gods. The ocean was full of secrets, and not all were kind. Poseidon was proud and quick to anger. He created earthquakes with his trident. He flooded lands and raised islands. But he also shaped creatures and watched over sailors. He sent the first horse from the sea foam. He helped heroes like Theseus and cursed others like Odysseus. The sea had no walls and no end. It could not be tamed. Even the gods treated it with care. When the moon pulled the tides and storms rose in the night, people remembered the power beneath the surface, and they whispered prayers to the ones who watched from the deep. The sky had its rulers, so did the land. But the sea kept its own kingdom, full of beauty, danger, and old forgotten names. Not all gods ruled with thunder or fire. Some shaped the world in quiet ways. They did not sit on thrones. They did not command armies, but their presence touched every life, every story, and every breath of the wind. The Fates were among the oldest. No one knew where they came from. Not even Zeus could command them. They were three sisters who held the thread of every life. Clotho spun the thread. Lachesis measured it. Atropos cut it. They worked in silence, steady and calm. When a thread was cut, a life ended. No one escaped their hands. The Muses were 9 sisters born of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. They brought inspiration to poets, singers, and thinkers. Each muse had her own gift. Calliope gave epic poetry. Clio told of history. Erato brought love poems. Melpomene spoke of tragedy. Thalia brought laughter. Urania watched the stars. Polyhymnia moved through sacred songs. Terpsichore danced. Euterpe played music that stirred the heart. Where the muses walked, ideas bloomed. Artists whispered prayers to them before picking up their tools. They were not loud, but their voices echoed through time. Nature was full of spirit. The world was alive with gentle watchers. Dryads lived in trees. When a tree was cut, a dryad wept. Naiads lived in streams and springs. They kept the water clear and cool. Oreads lived in mountains. They felt every tremble of the earth. There were river gods, too. Each river had its own. Some were wide and calm. Others were wild and fast. They shaped the land and gave life to the valleys they passed. Even the wind had its keepers. The Anemoi were the wind gods. Boreas was the cold north wind. Notus brought the heat of the south. Eurus came from the east with storms. Zephyrus was the west wind, soft and warm. They moved across the sky, shifting seasons and skies. Every part of the world had a spirit or god to care for it. From the smallest breeze to the tallest peak, nothing was left alone. These gods and spirits did not ask for praise. They asked only for care and respect. When people forgot them, the world felt it. The rivers dried. The winds turned sharp. But when remembered, the world softened. The great gods ruled from above, but the quiet ones lived beside us. In every tree, every song, and every sigh of the earth, they watched and waited. Long before the sun rose and set, before winds moved across the sky, the world was shaped by forces that had no names. In time, those forces became gods. They were not loud or often seen, but they guided the rhythms of the world. Helios was the god of the sun. Each day he drove a golden chariot across the sky. His horses burned with fire. As he passed, light followed. People watched the sky and thanked him for the warmth and life he gave. At night he crossed the ocean in a hidden path, ready to rise again. Before Helios, there was Hyperion, a Titan who also watched over the light. He was the father of Helios, Selene, and Eos. Though the Titans fell, his children kept his gifts alive. Selene was the goddess of the moon. Her chariot was silver. She moved more softly, lighting the night with a cool glow. When she looked down, lovers and poets felt her gaze. Some said she fell in love with a mortal man who slept forever, just to be near her. Eos was the dawn. She rose before her brother Helios and painted the sky with soft colors. She opened the gates of day and let the light begin. Her fingers were called rosy, her touch gentle. She brought hope each morning. The stars were watched by Astraeus, and the winds by his sons. The Anemoi, the wind gods, moved the clouds. They changed the seasons and guided storms. Zephyrus was kind. Boreas was harsh. Notus and Eurus were wild. Each had a place and a purpose. Nyx was the night. She was older than the Olympians. Even Zeus stepped aside when she passed. She wrapped the world in darkness, not to scare, but to rest. Her children were many. Hypnos, the spirit of sleep. Thanatos, the spirit of death. Moros, who brought fate. Even dreams were born from her shadow. The sky was ruled by Uranus long ago, the sea by Oceanus, and then Poseidon, the earth by Gaia, and the underworld by Hades. But between these great realms were the elements: fire, wind, rain, light, and shadow. Each had a voice. Each had a guide. These gods did not speak often, but they moved through the world every day. In the rising sun, in the cool night, in the hush before a storm, their presence was felt. They did not need temples. They had the sky, and they were remembered each time a new day began or an old one ended. Not all gods had faces or thrones. Some were the shape of an idea. They were not born in the way others were. They simply were. These were the personified forces, gods of thought and feelings, of chance and change. Nike was the spirit of victory. She had wings and moved like the wind. Warriors prayed to her before battle. Runners called to her at the start of a race. When she flew beside you, your strength grew. She did not speak. She only flew forward. Nemesis was balance. She watched over pride and punishment. When a person rose too high or acted with too much pride, Nemesis brought them back down, not out of anger, but out of fairness. Tyche was chance. She carried a wheel that turned without warning. Some days she brought good fortune. Other days she brought loss. Cities built temples to her. They hoped to stay on the good side of her wheel. Hypnos was sleep. He drifted through the world on quiet wings. He touched the eyes of mortals and gods. When he came, thoughts slowed. Time softened. His twin was Thanatos, the spirit of peaceful death. He was not cruel. He came only when a life had reached its end. Eris was discord. She walked where people argued. She sparked anger in quiet places. Once she threw a golden apple into a wedding. On it was written a message. For the fairest, this small act led to jealousy, to pride, and at last to war. Harmonia was the opposite. She brought peace and unity. She helped bring people back together. Her presence was rare but needed. There were many more. Ether was the bright air of the sky. Hemra was the day. Garrus was old age. Moros was doom. Philotes was friendship. Apat was deceit. Each one shaped the world in quiet ways. These gods did not demand offerings. They lived in moments, in the silence before sleep, in the joy after a win, in the turn of a card. in the feeling that something is fair or not. They were reminders that the world was not only made of stone and fire, it was also shaped by what we feel and what we hope. Their names may not be spoken as often, but they are there, in every choice, in every change, in every step we take, without knowing what comes next. The gods did not stay far from the world. They watched it, they shaped it, and often they stepped into it. When they walked among mortals, they left behind children. These were the demigods, half god, half human. Their lives were never easy, but their stories became legends. Zeus had many children. Some were kings, some were heroes. Perseus was one of them. He was brave and clever. He faced the Gorgon Medusa and returned with her head. He rescued a princess from a sea monster. His name lived on in the stars. Heracles, also a son of Zeus, was known for his strength. His life was full of trials. He carried the weight of his past and faced the 12 labors to find peace. His name means glory of Hera, though she tested him often. In time, he rose to Olympus and joined the gods. Apollo had many children too. Asclepius was one of them. He learned the art of healing. Some said he could even bring the dead back to life. This angered Zeus, who struck him down. But his name remained as a symbol of medicine. Ares, the god of war, had sons who followed him into battle. They were wild and strong, but not always wise. They lived by the sword and met many ends. The children of Hermes were clever and fast. They became messengers, thieves, and travelers. Sometimes the gods loved mortals deeply. Other times they used them. Mortal women bore children who would become hunters, queens, and founders of cities. Some were guided by their divine parents. Others were left to find their own path. Demigods did not live forever, but their stories did. Theseus sailed to Crete and faced the Minotaur. Bellerophon tamed the winged horse Pegasus and tried to reach Olympus. Achilles fought in the war at Troy, swift and strong, but bound by fate. Not all children of the gods became heroes. Some lived quiet lives. Some faced pain and loss. To be born of both worlds was to carry both power and burden. Even today, stories of demigods remind us of something deep. That greatness can come from anyone. That strength is not only in the gods, it is also in those who rise, who try, and who carry their own name through the world. They were not just children of gods. They were the link between heaven and earth. The gods were powerful, but even they could not escape fate. In the world of the Greeks, fate was not a choice or a chance. It was a thread already woven. What was meant to happen would happen, no matter how strong you were, no matter how far you ran. The voice of fate was often heard through oracles. These were sacred places where people came to ask questions. They brought offerings and waited in silence. A priestess or a seer would listen to the gods and speak their answers. The most famous oracle was at Delphi. There, on the side of a mountain, stood a temple to Apollo. Inside, the Pythia sat on a tripod over a deep crack in the earth. It was said that vapors rose from below and filled her with visions. She spoke in riddles. Her words were not always clear, but they were always believed. Kings came to Delphi before war. Travelers came before long journeys. Families came before choosing names for their children. The oracle did not give easy answers, but her voice carried the weight of truth. Apollo was the god of prophecy. He saw what was coming. He gave his gift to many. Some used it well. Others suffered under its weight. Cassandra, a princess of Troy, was given the gift of true sight. But when she turned away from Apollo, he cursed her. She would always speak the truth, but no one would ever believe her. Dreams were also seen as messages. Gods sent visions to guide or to warn. Sometimes they came in sleep. Sometimes they came in waking silence. People listened closely. They believed nothing was by accident. Even the gods respected the fates. Zeus could move the sky and the earth, but he could not break the thread once it was cut. Hera, Athena, and Apollo all guided fate, but none ruled over it. Prophecy shaped many lives. It warned Oedipus of his future. It led Achilles to the battlefield. It gave Odysseus a path home. It reminded heroes that even with strength and courage, some things could not be changed. To hear the voice of fate was to feel the wind of something greater. It could bring peace or fear, but it always brought truth. And in quiet moments, people still look to the sky, to the stars, and to their dreams, wondering what path has already been written for them. The gods no longer walk the earth. Their temples have fallen. Their names are carved in stone, worn by wind and time. But their stories have never faded. They live on, not in fire or thunder, but in memory. For centuries, people told their tales. Parents passed them to children. Poets sang them. Artists painted them. Statues rose in their honor. Even when belief faded, the wonder remained. The gods gave shape to the world. They explained the sun and the moon, the sea and the wind. They gave meaning to dreams, to storms, to joy and sorrow. They made people feel less alone in a world full of questions. Their names still echo today. Planets carry the names of gods. Mars for Ares, Venus for Aphrodite, Jupiter for Zeus, Neptune for Poseidon. Myths live in books, in plays, in films, and in the quiet corners of thought. Language remembers them too. Words like panic, which comes from Pan, or echo from the nymph who faded into sound. Even music, theatre, and medicine owe parts of themselves to the muses. Apollo, and as more than anything, the gods gave stories. Stories of strength and pride, of love and anger, of courage and failure. Stories that showed people they were not perfect and did not need to be. Even the gods made mistakes. We still learn from them. We see ourselves in their choices, in the hunger of Prometheus for knowledge, in the sorrow of Demeter, in the pride of Arachne, in the heart of Orpheus. These are not just tales of the past. They are mirrors that show us who we are. The world moves forward, but some stories remain. They return in quiet voices, in firelight, in dreams, in stars. And in the silence before sleep, if you listen closely, you might still hear the footsteps of the gods. Not with fear, not with thunder, but with wonder. And wonder, once planted, never truly fades. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope these stories brought you a little peace, a little wonder, and maybe even a dream or two. Wherever you are, and whatever your day has been, I hope you rest well tonight. Good night.